What is up, guys? I'm the Senator, and today we're going to be doing another tier list video. Now, last week I did a tier list video over the rifles in Rainbow Six Siege, and in that video I said that if that video would hit 69 likes, I would do another tier list video, but over the SMG class, and we hit that goal within the first hour and a half of the video being uploaded. That surprised me, so for this week, the goal is if this video hits 150 likes, I will make a top 10 list of the SMGs in Rainbow Six Siege. We'll be looking at, the damage output, the damage per second, the fire rate, all that good jazz, and making a definitive top 10 list with those SMGs. And I honestly doubt that we're going to hit that mark, so prove me wrong. Now, before I dive too deep in this video, a little disclaimer that for me, at least in this game, a lot of the SMGs feel very, very similar, so don't be surprised if you see me put a weapon that you think is a B tier weapon in A or S tier, or I put a weapon in A or S tier that you think belongs in B tier. To me, they feel very, very similar. And, we all have different opinions about these weapons and, different experiences with them. And you could even take professional players and have them each make a tier list, and it would look different. So it just all depends on the user, so don't get too butthurt if I, dog on your favorite SMG. But when it comes to putting these into a tier list, the most important aspect of an SMG for me is the control as well as the fire rate. Damage does come into play, but for me at least, fire rate and control is the most important. So just keep that in mind as I go through this. So first, let's look at the FMG9. This is the SMG that is available to both knock as well as smoke. I never really use it for smoke because I'd rather use the shotgun SMG11, but when I play knock, definitely using the FMG9. And for most of the game's lifespan, it's been a B or a C, but recently it got that buff, that damage buff. I think it added like 3 more damage to it. I think it fires like 34 damage with 800 rounds per minute, and it fires like a laser too. So with all that together, I think it is an A tier weapon. It could drop down to a B tier later on in the video, but right now, just as someone who likes to play knock, it's a very, very accurate gun. I never have any problem at all handling that recoil. It does a lot of damage and fires at 800 rounds per minute. It's a pretty solid weapon. MP5K. I will say that I am not a fan of this weapon, and I never really use it because, again, just like with the FMG9, when I run mute, I always run shotgun SMG11. But from what I recall about this weapon when I did used to play it a lot, it was pretty middle of the road, so I think it's fair to maybe put it in B, and then we can judge the rest of the weapons whether or not it's better than MP5 or not. UMP45, the worst gun in the game. Not the worst SMG, but probably the worst gun in the game. People argue, it has a high damage output, but that fire rate is just so slow. I would honestly rather have a semi-automatic weapon than use the UMP45 because it is just so slow. Okay, pausing the video for a second to remind you to subscribe and hit the bell icon. That way you can be notified every time I post a video. Okay, back to the video. Next we have the MP5, and a lot of people will think it's going to S, but I gotta put it in A because the only reason people play it isn't because it's an amazing gun. It is a solid weapon, but people play it for that ACOG. I mean, it's obvious. So I think A is pretty fair looking at, the damage output and the fire rate of it. Solid gun, not S tier. Now looking at the P90, which is the other option for the GIGN defenders. It's definitely worse than the MP5. It's either got to go in a B or a C. I'm really struggling with this one because it does have a very, very high fire rate. I think it's like 970 rounds per minute. But the damage on it is just so ridiculously low. I think it does like 22 damage. And I said that fire rate matters more to me, but that damage is just so low. I gotta put it in C for now. That could change again, but C, it's a C tier gun. Now looking at the 9x19 VSN, this is one of the best SMGs in the game, and I want to put it in S tier, but I can't. It's got to go into A tier, and I'll tell you why. It is probably the most accurate gun on defense. As far as damage output, I think it's middle of the road. I don't really remember. But I do know that its fire rate is lacking. It has, I believe, 720 rounds per minute. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's in the lower 700s in terms of fire rate. And when it comes to an SMG, I'd rather have one that is a little bit faster and maybe a little bit more difficult to control than one that is slower and easier to control. Because of that one-shot hit mechanic, I want to be able to throw as many rounds downrange as possible. And I can't do that with a 9x19 VSN. It is one of the best guns in the game. It's one of the reasons that Kapkan is such an underrated operator, and he's really, really good. But I can't put it in S tier because it's just so slow. Well, it's not so slow, but it's slower than I would expect an S tier weapon to be. MP7, S tier. It's that simple. It's just so fast and so accurate. I don't remember what the damage is on it, but I mean, honestly, that doesn't matter with a weapon that is that fast and that accurate. It's an S tier weapon. Now, the 9mm C1 that is used by Frost. A lot of people like this weapon. I personally am not crazy about it because that fire rate is so slow. It does have a good damage output, and it's a great gun for someone who anchors like Frost. But again, it's just so slow. It's bum 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 bum. That's too slow for me. So I gotta put it in C tier because it's not worse than the UMP45. There's no way. Now the MPX. A lot of people don't like the MPX, but I've always been a huge fan of it. It's one of the reasons I like Valkyrie, other than her utility. But I do know the statistics on it. It's the middle of the road, and so I think it belongs in the middle of the road. But for me, it's very, very easy to control. It has a pretty decent fire rate, but I mean, it's not the best weapon. It is a B tier weapon. The M12. This is the SMG that's available to Caveira. It's a D tier weapon for me. It's like the UMP45 is so slow to fire, and I would much rather just use the shotgun that she has. Now the MP SSD that is used by Echo. It's on par with. It's actually better than the MP5. But it's not an S tier weapon. The reason it's better is because it does have the same fire rate, but it does have more damage. But I still don't see it being an S tier weapon. Because again, people like it because of the ACOG. Other than that, it's a solid weapon, but it's not an S tier weapon in my book. And I'm very, very strict about what I want to put in S tier. Now looking at the PDW9, this may or may not make a lot of people mad, but I gotta put it in S tier. This is a weapon that is on the attacker's side. It is Jackal's SMG. Has an ACOG, has a 50 round drum mag. And I think that even if, you put this on a defender, took away the ACOG, and gave him a 30 round magazine, I would still put him in either S or A tier. A tier just by looking at the overall statistics, the damage, and the fire rate. But the reason I'm putting in S is because on top of that, it is so easy to control. It is a laser beam. If you lose a gunfight with this gun, you're trash because it is a laser beam that fires a very, very high rate of fire. Next is the Vector 45 ACP. This is the fastest shooting weapon on this list. It fires at 1,200 rounds per minute. But I'm going to put it in A tier and not S tier. And I know that I've said that fire rate is the most important thing to me, but it has a damage of 22 and has a magazine capacity of 25 plus 1. So you just burn through it so quickly. And the horizontal recoil is really insane on it. You have to be very, very close quarters and anchoring to really do anything with it. But so I think A is fair for it. I could see some people thinking it's S tier and some people thinking it's B tier. I think A is a good place for this weapon. And now that I'm looking at my list as it is, I need to make a change. I think the FMG9 needs to be bumped down. I do think that it's an amazing SMG now, but when looking at it compared to the MP5 and the Vector, I can't see it being on that tier, so I have to move that down. Now the T5 SMG, this is an A tier weapon. The reason being is it has a pretty good damage output at, I believe, 28 damage. But on top of that, it has a fire rate of 900, and it very easy to control. Never have a problem with this gun at all. It does have some odd, maybe a little bit of horizontal recoil, but overall, A tier weapon, great gun. Now the Scorpion that is used by Ella, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm not a fan of Ella. I probably have, less than 2 hours in total playing with her. And I'll say that I'm not crazy about the Scorpion. They did buff it recently to where the first 11 shots are somewhat predictable. Then after that, it's just insane. High fire rate, hard to control. I don't think the damage output is that great on it from what I recall. So I think it's fair to put it in B. The Ella mains may just hate that, but honestly, I don't have enough experience with her to, accurately judge it. But just going off the statistics that I remember and what I remember from it, I think it's a B tier weapon. In the hands of an Ella main, it may be an A or an S tier. But for me, at least, it's a B tier weapon. Next, we have the K1A that is used by Vigil, and I think that of all the weapons on this list, it does have the highest damage output. Let me go ahead and check that. I think it does have the highest damage output. It does a damage of 36, which is pretty good, and it has the fire rate of 720. So, good weapon. For me, it's either between A or B. Hard hitting, but again, 720 is not the fastest. I would like my SMGs to be much faster, so I think it goes into the B category. A lot of people will be screaming at me, whatever. Again, it's just that for an SMG, I think it has to be fast, and especially in this game where you gotta kill somebody with one headshot, a gun that is slower is automatically at a disadvantage regardless of how much damage it has. Now looking at the MX4 Storm, and a lot of people are sleeping on this weapon. It is my favorite weapon in the game, and I would love to put it in S tier, but I know it's not going to jive with a lot of people, so I think A tier is pretty fair for it. It has 26 damage, which isn't a lot, but it fires at a rate of 950 rounds per minute with a 30 round magazine. It is a laser beam. It's so good, and a lot of people don't realize this because people usually don't play Alibi. There's other players that they would rather play, but as I discussed in a video about Alibi, I think she's one of the best roamer, if not the best roamer, because of how great this weapon is. And so there's no question in my mind, it is an A tier weapon, and a lot of you guys are sleeping on it, but just go play Alibi and mess around with the MX4 Storm. As I said, the damage isn't that great on it, but with it firing that fast and having a 30 round magazine, it's insane. Now the AUG A3. First of all, if you're running the AUG instead of the TSG9 on Kaid, there's no hope for you. It goes to C. It does the same damage output as Vigil's, but it's slower. It fires out, I believe, 700 rounds per minute. It's not a great gun. I would much rather use the TSG9. Now the P10 Roni, the last one on the list, and I would have thought this would have been in the machine pistol category because a Roni is literally just a converter that, you put your pistol in and makes it into a carbine. I'm not sure, so maybe that's why, I don't know. But this is what I like to run on Mozzie. It's one of my favorite weapons in the game, but its huge disadvantage is its magazine capacity. I believe it has 20+1 capacity. It does fire at a rate of 980 rounds per minute, but I think, considering the recoil of it, how if you don't hit your first few shots, you'll pay for it, I think it goes into B tier, because I'm looking at it compared to the MX4 Storm, and the only spot where the MX4 Storm does better than the Roni is its magazine capacity. But with the Roni, you'll really suffer with a high fire rate and low magazine capacity because you just burn through it. If you miss your shots, then you're screwed. But overall, this is the one I prefer to use because as a roamer, I want to be able to shoot really, really fast. I think B is fair for it. So I think overall, I'm pretty confident with this list. I know that there's probably some guns in here that you think just belong in S tier, but again, like my last video, I really want to limit what I put in S tier because if I have 5 guns in S tier, then there's not really any that are that special. So I think these are the guns that stand out as being just the best of the best. Even if the PDW, you know, as I said, had a 30-round magazine and didn't have an ACOG, its damage and how accurate it is puts it in that S tier category. And I would love to see, you know, Ubisoft give this SMG to a defender and then take away the ACOG or the drum mag, whatever they need to do for balancing reasons, because it sucks that it's on Jackal, who already has the C7E, which is probably the best assault rifle in the game, and then they have this on him as well, and you never even get to play Jackal because he's banned. But I think overall, this is pretty fair, you know, judging damage output and fire rate and just overall control. Sorry if I just, you know, just completely disrespected your favorite weapon, but as I said earlier, a lot of these weapons feel very, very similar to me. And honestly, you could take the top three, you could take the S tier, A tier, and B tier, and you could probably move them up and down one, because they're all so similar, and it just comes down to what you prefer. Would you rather have, you know, a weapon that, you know, has a high damage and then you sacrifice a little bit when it comes to the fire rate, or would you rather have a weapon that just shoots extremely fast and you don't really care how much the damage is because you know you're going to hit that headshot? And this all depends on the level of play. If you're a better player, you're usually going to want a higher rate of fire because you can hit your headshots. Whereas if you're a lower player and you struggle to hit your headshots and you know you're probably just going to hit the body, you want a higher damage weapon. So it all depends on the player, but for me, this is what I think this tier list should look like. So that's about it for this video. Remember, if this video gets 150 likes, which I don't believe you guys can do it, I'll do a list where I do the top 10, ranking them from, you know, 1 to 10 best SMGs in the game, and I'll use the statistics, and I'll be looking at, you know, the damage output, damage per second, the fire rate, as well as how generally easy it is to control these weapons. So I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That way you can be notified every time I post a video. I'm the Sender, and as always, have a good one.